Welcome, welcome, welcome to the second episode of Where in the World, featuring Old Chiliax. Now, I know this is not in alphabetical order, but that's because we got a special request. Mr. Tim France from the Pathfinder 2E fan group Facebook group. So thank you for that request, and your wish is my command in that respect. In terms of going forward from here, I definitely will accept requests for each type of lore series. So we have the Where in the World, What the Faction. Also, like I said, if you could see there, he requested for the Hell Knights, so that'll be coming up real soon by Sunday this week, which will be the 25th. So be looking forward to that. So because again, it fits nicely to Chiliax and the Hell Knights go 1 and 1. So mwah. All right. So without further ado, we go into Old Chiliax, what I like to call the devil capital of the world. This is where most of the tieflings are gonna be from, or cruel humans. The nations in Old Chiliax are obviously Chiliax, Diabolic Monarchy, and then you have Nidal, lawful evil as well. Isga, lawful neutral, which is a new vassal state of Chiliax. And then you have Ravenel, which is a confederation, and we'll get more into why that is later. As you can see, Chiliax definitely boasts the highest population, with Nidal in second, Ravenel in third, and Isker. So, next we have the places of interest here. So, places of interest, as you can see here, are the Devil's Perch here. We also have, in terms of other major ones, we'll cover that later. But again, Chiliax being the predominantly southern region here, Isker, northeast, Nidal in the north, and Ravenel in the northwest. Next, we have the peoples. So typical ancestries that would be from Old Chiliax would be gnomes, goblins, halflings, Nidalis, Taldan, and Varisians. So pretty self-explanatory there. Don't need to go into that too much. The common language is spoken here. Common, gnomish, goblin, halfling, infernal, shadow tongue, and Varisian. Varisian is going to be a pretty common language just about everywhere, because Varisians were essentially like some of the earliest explorers of Golarion, but that's more on the 1E lore side of things, which we're not going to get into on within these series, because these are 2E lore series. So the factions that you'll find within Chiliax, at least the major factions you'll find. The Bellflower Network, which lies predominantly over in Ravenel, although they do operations within Old Chiliax, or within Chiliax. The Firebrands, and of course, a huge fan favorite, the Hell Knights, which we'll get into in the next video. So stay tuned for that. Next, we have the religions that you'll find in Old Chiliax. Asmodeus should not come as a surprise when you have a diabolic monarchy in Chiliax. Norgabur, for obvious reasons, is again lawful evil. Norgabur followers can definitely hang out, no problem. Desna, surprisingly, and Shaylin, and Erastil. Very odd indeed, but that's predominantly because of Ravenel and a little bit of Nidal, but predominantly Ravenel. And then you have zon'kuthon, which actually hails from this area, but that is for another video. Of course, that would be the Oh My God series, and he would be at the end unless he had a special request in the comments section. So be sure to, if you want to hear about zon'kuthon, I'd actually love to go deep into him. I've never really invested too much time in zon'kuthon because typically he's banned from most tables in terms of good campaigns. So I'd actually love to do some research on him. So be sure to smash that comment section. Next, we have the resources you will find in Old Chiliax. Predominantly exports here. We have alcohol, drugs. That's pretty common for most places. Armor, weapons, jewelry, gems, livestock, and hides, lumber, luxury goods, mercenaries. Mercenaries, because of the Hell Knights. Hell Knights can be hired depending on what kind of problem you're dealing with. Ores, seafood, ships, spices, and salt, and textiles. A little bit of everything. If you've seen the Absalom and the Starstone Isle, pretty close. No sky metals here. No sky metals. Those are very, very rare. So next we have the notable figures. We have Miss Domina Gilia Benilis. And by the way, I'm reading from the Lost Omens World Guide here. And in the sidebar here, we have Domina Gilia Benilis. The ruler of Ravenel is a clever and forthright leader whose perspective has been informed in unusual ways by extraordinary experiences. So, this is the ruler of the newfound country of Ravenel. So, be sure to keep a lookout on her. She's not brought up in. I wouldn't say it's a spoiler, but at one point in Age of Ashes, you do make your way to Ravenel. I'm not gonna say why, because then that would be a spoiler. I'm definitely gonna try and include her there, because unfortunately, she's not really included in the actual adventure path, but she's new and cool, so I'm definitely gonna try and put her in there. Anyway, that's just extra though. We also have the Black Throne. Sworn to eternal servitude to zon'kuthon, the members of the Black Triune. I'm sorry, did I put Throne? It's Triune. Excuse me. I'll do a manual edit there in the video. That's my apologies. Sworn to eternal servitude to zon'kuthon, the members of the Black Triune have ruled over Nidal since the days of Earthfall. So, Black Triune here. Very lovely looking members here. zon'kuthon is into self-mutilation and all masochism and all that fun stuff. So, but again, more on him in the gods video. So, next we have Archcountess Levisvia Vasvion. Try saying that 5 times fast. So, this Agorian noble was instrumental in gathering forces to break the glorious reclamation. Her role in finding traitors has won her considerable acclaim in Chiliax. Essentially, what you'll come to learn here in the history as we go to more of a deep dive here is that Ravenel is a confederation that's pushed out of Chiliax and claimed its own hold outside of it. Because Chiliax used to be damn near that whole section minus Nidal. So we'll get more into that here in a bit. And that's where the Bellflower Network comes into play too. So last but not least, we have Abrogail Throne II. A ruthless and effective ruler. Queen Abrogail has proven a strong leader and has maintained the power of Chiliax, even in the face of many setbacks. Fun fact, which we'll get to her in the Legends video, she's been a ruler since she was 17 years old and has held down a place like Chiliax, full of devils, tieflings, devil summoning, and all sorts of crazy stuff. She's what I would call a bad bitch, if you will. So, next, we have Chiliax. So, like I said, this is the whole area of Chiliax here, and we'll go ahead and begin with the reading of the overview of Old Chiliax, and then we'll go ahead and dive into Chiliax itself. I'll go ahead and zoom in back into Chiliax when we get into the deep dive of Chiliax itself. Once one of the greatest human empires in Avestan, Chiliax has declined significantly in power and influence over the past century. When the god Aridin died, Chiliax collapsed into social upheaval and, shortly thereafter, civil war. Seeing an opportunity to seize power from chaos, House Throne, which had long practiced the dark arts of diabolism in secret, entered into an open pact with the powers of hell. Backed by legions of devils, the house's own fearsome armies, and the support of shadow callers from the neighboring land of Nidal, House Throne stamped out its enemies and claimed the Chelish throne. Following its victory, House Throne ushered in sweeping changes, reshaping Chiliax into an infernal empire. Today in Chiliax, the official histories are little more than state-sanctioned propaganda. The government runs a merciless and labyrinth bureaucracy devoted to elevating the ruthless and crushing the weak. And the once white roses of Agorian now blossom in fields of luxurious, velvety black blossoms. Yet, for all of its insistence on discipline and authority, House Throne's rule has not gone unchallenged. The city of Westcrown, in particular, has been home to the subdued dissent and underworld corruption, which came to a head when the Council of Thieves was unmasked and broken roughly a decade ago, which would be 4709. Even more recently, two major rebellions, one successful, the other not, dramatically reshaped the balance of power and weakened House Throne's grip on the region. Nevertheless, Infernal Chiliax remains an immensely wealthy, influential, and well-armed nation, and House Throne's rules continues to guide not only its own land, but also the fate of nations beyond its borders. Isker, Nidal, and newly independent Ravanal all bear particularly tight and intricate ties with the Devil's Empire. Devastated by years of bitter warfare following centuries of exploitative, near-colonial rule, Isker remains a subordinate thrall to Chiliax. Its government is kept on a short leash and granted little agency to chart its own course. Out in the hinterlands, however, far from House Throne's watchful eye, some Iskari towns are developing their own unlikely alliances, just to survive. The shadowy nation of Nidal also counts itself an ally to Chiliax, but its position is nearly opposite Isker's. Steeped in millennia of sinister magic and the cruel religion of zon'kuthon, Nidal does not consider itself a vassal, but rather a close and valued advisor to a like-minded friend who could, perhaps, benefit a little coaxing to become even crueler. Ravanal, by contrast, broke away from Chiliax several years ago and declared itself an independent nation. Yet even after being formally recognized as a free state, Ravanal has found it cannot fully escape its former ruler's influence. Chiliax holds Ravanal pinned against the sea, and the old empire's economic and diplomatic domination of the region is so complete that despite having supernatural protection against direct military incursion, Ravanal must remain in Chiliax's good graces to survive. For now, House Throne seems inclined to accept its former Archduke's independence as an unfortunate but unchallenged fact, and it has dealt fairly with Ravanal. Yet, as many on both sides are well aware, a devil's mercy is fickle, and its memory long. Should a few delicate circumstances change, Ravanal's sudden independence might just as suddenly be reversed, so they would no longer be independent. All right, so we'll go into the lore of Chiliax, the country itself now, as that was a overall view of the region. So with the region, Nidal, neutral / friendly. Isker pretends to be friendly, trying to find ways out of the dominant government that is Chiliax, Ravanel, being as friendly as it needs to be to not be attacked by Chiliax, essentially. So now we'll go into Chiliax itself. For over half a millennium, Imperial Chiliax was the dominant power across Aveston. When king aspects of the even-tongued broke Chiliax away from Taldor, annexed Andoran, and conquered Iskar and Galt, he began a centuries-long era of glory that saw Chelish influence, political, cultural, and military, spread across the continent. Bolstered by the favor of Eredin, patron god of humanity, the empire ascended to become a jewel of human civilization, an honor it held unchallenged for centuries. Chiliax's golden age ended with Eredin's death. In the turmoil that followed, the Theobolic House Throne made an infernal pact with the powers of hell, the terms of which remained shrouded in deep secrecy. The result of that grand bargain, however, still reverberates across the world. Allied with Asmodeus' legions of fiends, Queen Abrogail I seized power, beginning a dynasty that has held the Chelish throne for nearly a century. Today, Chiliax is a proud but diminished empire, renowned for its wine, opera, and glorious architecture. In terms of architecture, quick note there, for GMs, when you're trying to describe Chiliax, very Gothic, like German Gothic style architecture here. Fun fact. So, anyway. But also for the devils in its secrets and the cruelty of its laws. Under Throne rule, the poor are viciously oppressed. Crimes are punished by agonizing public excruciations and executions, and slavery is both commonplace and harshly practiced, with none of the legal protections that existed in Eredin's day. The House of Asmodeus is the state religion. Or the Church of Asmodeus, the Church of Asmodeus is the state religion, and the other faiths are permitted only by House Throne's sufferance. So, in terms of the public excruciations and executions, Chiliax has been really rough with that stuff. So, one thing they'll do is like one of they prefer to see people publicly humiliated versus just outright, like they prefer humiliation over outright killing someone. So one of the things they'll do is in Agorian there's a main public square, and there are these pikes that go up about 15 feet. Oh no, about 25 feet. And they're about 8 inches diameter, and they're these huge, like basically like a big needle. Right? They go straight up. Some go on an angle, and what they'll do is they'll pierce you through it and slide you down to the bottom. And if you can pull your way all the way up and over, you could be free. Which most common citizens can't do. So you can literally walk by in the open square of Agorian, and you can see people just slowly bleeding out and dying. And what's worse about it too is they'll have the guards come feed them, give them water, whatever, not every, like once a day they'll give them a meal and water. But I mean, you're literally impaled, so it's like it's a rough place to be. Yet Chiliax is also a realm of high refinement, stunning and sophisticated art, and an undeniable grandeur in both public and private spaces. The polished elegance of Agorian, and bustling naval yards of Ostenso, and the aging magnificence of West Crown even with the damage from that city's recent rebellion only partially repaired, are among the wonders of human civilization. The Empire's opera halls, palaces, and cathedrals are unrivaled in their splendor. Even if the Asmodean cathedral's resplendence bears a decisively sinister cast. Chiliax's citizens tend to be ambitious, educated, and formidably intelligent. They deal with devils as equals or even treat the infernal as their lessers, never approaching the powers of hell as abject supplicants. Not all of the Empire's citizens are fond of fiends, though outsiders sometimes assume otherwise. The various orders of Hell Knights model themselves after Hell's ruthless discipline and unyielding law, but they do not venerate devils and indeed require recruits, known as Armingers, to win knighthood by slaying a devil in single combat. Additionally, Iomade, the chivalrous goddess of crusaders, was born in Chiliax, and the inheritors' righteous faith remains strong there, despite recent events exasperating the long-standing strain between Iomade's church and that of Asmodeus. Moreover, because Cheliax culture values brilliance in nearly any pursuit, and because its nobles are perpetually striving for advancement against one another, it thinks itself more meritocratic than many societies on Golarion. Low-born but talented individuals can always find patrons willing to advance their careers in exchange for profits or rejected glory, and can often marry or bribe their way into titles of their own in time. The Hell Knights, too, offer ready advancement for those who can prove themselves in service. However, Chiliax is also merciless in enforcing the downside of its meritocracy. Those unlucky enough to lack the qualities it values are treated as completely worthless, undeserving of even basic dignity. Furthermore, this supposed meritocracy applies only to humans. Halflings, Hellspawn, and the winged Strix are shut out from opportunity altogether. Cheliax halflings are almost all either servants or slaves, and they are treated with premonitory disdain. Hellspawn, who are descendants of humans with fiendish blood, are held in even lower regard, for they are seen as the fruits of an abhorrent lapse in self-control while dealing with fiends. The seldom seen Strix, enigmatic, black-winged humanoids, are commonly considered brutes, barely even capable of language. These and other contradictions in its nature make Chiliax one of the most complicated in the world's nations. Those contradictions have only sharpened over the past decade, which has not been kind to the Infernal Empire. Though still mighty, Chiliax has suffered a number of stinging setbacks. It lost a major armada in the shackles, a significant blow to Chelish naval power that put an end, at least temporarily, to Chiliax's hopes of expanding into the Mwanji expanse. Next, a violent rebellion calling itself the Glorious Reclamation erupted in West Crown, causing widespread social unrest before Queen Abrogail's forces were able to crush the rebels and restore order. While Iomade's faith has not been outlawed in Chiliax following the Glorious Reclamation's defeat, it is watched more closely, and its adherents have learned not to criticize the Queen in even the mildest of terms. Simultaneously with the Glorious Reclamation, a second rebellion broke out in the Archduchy of Ravenel, which declared itself an independent nation, a bitter pill that House Throne was forced to swallow, lest it suffer truly unacceptable consequences. All these blows have pushed Chiliax into a position more precarious than it has occupied since the first days of Throne ascendancy. The Empire's enemies, and most notably Andoran, circle eagerly around it, waiting for a chance to pounce. They may find, however, that Chiliax remains a wily and dangerous adversary, and its weakness may be deliberately exasperated as a ploy to draw in the foolish. So, I'll go ahead and zoom in here. Over in the Devil's Perch is what I'm speaking on now. So the Devil's Perch on the west side of Chiliax. The Devil's Perch. This stark reach of vertiginous red rocks and narrow canyons is home to the Strix, who have an outsized reputation in Chiliax for savagery and xenophobia. For centuries, Chilaxians avoided the arid pillars and plateaus of the Devil's Perch, but the recent discovery of silver in the region has sparked new interest. And new hostilities between the native Strix and human interlopers, which the Chelish government has only partially contained. The next section I'm going to go into here is the Whisperwood, which you can see is east of the capital of Golarion, with Sonara inside. This vast and ancient forest in the Empire's heartlands has been left largely untouched, despite centuries of settlement around it. Desperate outlaws sometimes seek refuge beneath its leaves, only to meet grisly misfortune. Local lore holds that a strange menace grips the Whisperwood, and it's well known that devils hunt its depths. A gate to hell is rumored to lie in the Scar Thicket, near the forest's heart, but none of those who have ventured in to close this gate have ever returned. So, that concludes Chiliax. We move forward now to Isgur. Since its founding, Isgur has been a vassal state. It was formed with Taldor's conquests of the area, and centuries later, it was annexed by Chiliax in the even-tongued conquest of 4081. Unlike some of Chiliax's other holdings, Isgur did not break free during the Throne Ascendancy, and it remains in thrall today. However, there are signs that the neglect and exploitation that have long characterized Isgur's relationship with its patron state are beginning to give way to a new era of closer involvement, for better and worse. The Konorica River, which bisects Isgur from east to west and connects Chiliax's sea trade to Druma and Lake Incarthen, is the nation's lifeblood. The river and its support roads are key to Isgur's regional importance, so most of its military is tasked with protecting the trade routes from bandits, monsters, and any other dangers. Because travelers and merchants rely heavily on the Konorica and its trade roads, settlements along the river, including the capital city, Eladir, are not the isolated rural settlements their wooden buildings and quaint architecture might suggest. Although their pierced balusters, colorful glass-beaded hangings, and brightly painted frieza boards give even the finest homes in Isgur a rustic air, these towns are relatively cosmopolitan. Isgur's hinterlands, however, have been less fortunate. Historically, Isgur has always been something of an afterthought to its masters. Taldor and later Chiliax have held Isgur as a vassal state, extracting its natural resources and talent while offering little in return. As a result, Isgur has almost no industry, fortifications, or development outside of the Konorica River's narrow band of prosperity. When the Goblin Blood Wars of 4697 to 4701 erupted, they devastated a region that had no defense, save valiant but badly overmatched local militias. The Goblin Blood Wars saw hundreds of goblin tribes, led by ferocious and disciplined hobgoblin commanders, boil out of the Chitterwood and flood across Isker, destroying and devouring all in their path. Although the goblin horde was eventually driven back by an unprecedented alliance between the forces of Chiliax, Druma, and Andoran, the toll in lost Iskari lives and wealth was enormous. Those losses continue to define much of the country. Thousands of Iskari children were orphaned by the war, and their weak, war-ravaged government could not help them. The Church of Asmodeus stepped in to fill that need, founding a network of orphanages to cultivate its young charges in the Archfiend's unholy faith. These children begin intensive training at early ages, enabling them to quickly master difficult arts, such as the arcane fighting style practiced by their sisterhood of the Golden Arenas. The success of the orphanage's graduates has drawn notice in Chiliax. With the old empire weakened and its enemies gathering, some Chilaxians have begun to look toward Isker, both for investment opportunities and a potential first line of a defense against Andoran. The increased Cellist presence is welcomed by some and quietly resented by others, but none can deny that, perhaps for the first time, Chiliax seems to have taken a serious interest in bolstering its vassal state. There are even rumors that Isker's long-serving steward, Hedvind VI, may soon be forced to abdicate his seat. Though Hedvind has always been a loyal right hand, House Throne has expressed impatience with his incompetence and a desire to see Isker's throne occupied by someone more capable. This rumor has mostly been met with shrugs in Isker, where Hedvind is widely regarded as a cellist puppet, who has neither the interest nor the ability to help his own people. The overgrown remains of massacred towns and unmarked graves, neglected since the Goblin Blood Wars, stand as a mute testament to them. The Iskari, however, are not the only ones to carry scars from the Goblin Blood Wars. The goblins themselves paid a terrible price for their short-lived triumph. Not only were they massacred by the thousands in the final battles, but the victorious armies and later vengeful Iskari survivors burned great swaths of the Chitterwood to destroy the goblins' homes. From these hardships, a new strain of goblin leadership has emerged. Several goblin chieftains, brighter and longer-sighted than their predecessors, have formed an alliance between their tribes and made diplomatic overtures to nearby Iskari settlements. Given that the war's wounds remain raw, the tribe's progress is slow, but they have established some mutual defense agreements with nearby towns, and they have begun to change how goblins are perceived in the region. Isker's rural towns and villages, accustomed to making their own decisions without any help from a disinterested central government, have found some of these goblins to be more reliable allies than their own nominal lords. This shift in relations is driven by need. Undead have long bedeviled this land, particularly in remote places such as Finder's Gulch and the plague-ravaged ruins of Gillimore, where rotting and ravening zombies stalk through the crumbling houses of the dead. Urgathoan cults proliferate through blood-soaked battlefields and the blackened remains of torched villages, feeding on the fear and pain that still linger in those haunted sites. These malign forces have grown stronger and more numerous since the Goblin Blood Wars, and some say since Tarbafon's rise. Whether or not that rumor is true, it is certain that neither goblins nor humans can afford to ignore the rising tide of undead in Isker's hinterlands much longer. And that concludes Isker. We go now to Nidal in the north. The lovely zon'kuthon area, as I like to call it. And it's always blindsided me too, because it doesn't, like, Chiliax sounds like a rough place. Welcome to Nidal, may I take your order? It doesn't sound like it'd be a bad place, you know? Nidal just doesn't sound like it'd be a bad place. But anyway. Time scarcely seems to touch the shadow-chained nation of Nidal.
10,000 years
ago, when Earthfall cast the world into darkness, 3 ancient horse lords of Nidal threw themselves on the mercy of zon'kuthon, the Midnight Lord. They pledged that if the god of shadow and pain interceded to protect them, they and all their descendants would be sworn to him eternally. Yikes. zon'kuthon accepted their bargain, gifting the trio with cursed immortality as the Black Triune and sealing Nidal's fate ever after. All Nidalis since then have been born into zon'kuthon's faith, and from earliest childhood they are taught that pain is sacred, suffering is joy, and their holiest duty is to endlessly refine and sharpen those sensations into sacraments. Lovely group so far. Okay. The Midnight Lord's hand lies heavily on his land. Unnatural gloom blankets Nidal. From the shade of the enormous black-leaved trees over languidly glittering pangolai to the perpetual storm clouds over the port city of Nisroch. Colors seem to drain away as one moves toward the heartlands of Nidal, leaving the world tinted subtly monochrome. With the presence of zon'kuthon so palpable throughout the nation, Nidal has never cared overmuch about either expanding or defending its territory. Its borders are divinely drawn, and they haven't changed since the days of the Black Triune's Pact. The sole major interruption in Nidal's history was its conquest by Chiliax, which ushered in a period of reform and openness unusual for the insular theocratic nation. After Aridin's death, however, the relationship between Nidal and Chiliax changed once more, with Nidal immediately throwing its full force behind House Throne in the Chelish Civil War. Once House Throne was fully in power, the alliance between Nidal and the Theobolic regime became stronger than ever, with agents of each country frequently serving in the other. Today, Nidalis clerics, shadow callers, and advisors can be found throughout Chiliax and its holdings, wielding their influence to bolster House Throne's power and thus spread holy suffering across the land. Life with Nidal, meanwhile, continues much as it always has. The Umbral Court, Nidal's shadow-touched aristocracy, governs on behalf of the Black Triune. Shadowy agents enforce the court's authority outside the major cities and abroad. The Umbral Court is heavily intertwined with Nidal's other main sources of authority. zon'kuthon's church, the Pale Druids of the Uskwood, and the specialist magical academies that train Nidalis shadow callers and shadow binders. But these organizations are distinct, albeit overlapping, and their goals sometimes conflict. This is particularly true of the Uskwood Druids, who see little value in the Chelish alliance and would prefer to withdraw the government's full attention back into Nidal altogether. Farmers, fisherfolk, and artisans pay lip service to zon'kuthon while trying to raise their small, close-knit families in his shadow. Though many might prefer to live differently, they may have been under the Midnight Lord's yoke for so long that they can no longer imagine a different existence, and hope is dangerous in this land, especially when a grim but assured peace is the alternative. The nation's long stability has allowed many families to spend generations perfecting their skills, so Nidalee's glass, intricately cut jewelry, and ornamental metalwork are unsurpassed in Aveston. Additionally, because Nidal is the only civilization in the Inner Sea to have survived the destruction of Earthfall intact, it is a repository for lore that exists nowhere else in the world. That's why Norgriber has a presence there. Fun fact for trivia, GMs and players. Far outside the cities, on the gray-grassed Atarin plains, live a hardy, proud people who are descended from the original Nidalee's horse lords and still observe many of their traditions. These clans are famed for their swiftness and courage of their horses, which are prized across the Inner Sea. Their heritage and cultural links to ancient Nidal grant the modern households a degree of freedom that no others in their shadow-bound land enjoy. But even there, they dare not defy the Umbral court directly. Nevertheless, the Atarin Ranches harbor many of the devotees of Desna who call themselves dreamers. These idealists share the secret guarded hope that someday it may be possible to break zon'kuthon's grip on their land. Nidal is also home to sizable populations of Caligni, Kyle, also known as fetchlings, Velstrax, sinister fiends from the Shadow Plane, and light-averse undead such as vampires. Caligni are children of Old Cheliax, an Aslanti settlement. They have developed their own unique traditions, pieced together from accounts of ancient Aslant, within their broader auspices of Nidalee's culture. Kyle, descendants of humans, who were long ago stranded on the Shadow Plane and altered by its magic, prefer to blend into human society as much as possible. Velstrax and vampires in Nidal, meanwhile, flaunt their natures openly and tend to hold privileged positions, in keeping with their power and the terror they inspire in others. So, we'll go ahead and zoom in real quick. The Mind Spin Mountains over here, this region, basically this mountain range that locks off Nidal from its eastern bordered country, is what I'm going into next. The Mind Spin Mountains. This steep, forbidding range serves as a natural barrier between Belskin, Nidal, Molthun, Nurmathos, and Varisia. The dwarven cities of Jonderhof and Kragadon are in the Mind Spins, as are the nation Oprak and Citadel Vraid, home to the Hell Knight Order of the Nail. Otherwise, the mountains hold few notable settlements outside of the handful of strategically important passes linking one nation to the next. The wilder regions of the Mind Spins are home to dragons, giant tribes, as well as harpies, manticores, drakes, and other strange, fierce monsters. GMs have fun with that. Ancient ruins, some dating before Earthfall, lie hidden among the peaks and valleys, including several wanders from the long-lost Fassalon. And that concludes Nidal. Next, we're going to go ahead and move into Ravanel. Ravanel. The latest and most drastic shift in the Old Chiliax region is the independence of Ravanel, which seceded from Chiliax and declared itself as a free nation a few years ago, under the leadership of Domina Gilia Benilis, the former Lord Mayor of Kintargo. Ravanel has threaded the delicate line between shoring up its own position as a regional power and maintaining cordial, if strained, relationships with its neighbors. Domina Benilis must also preserve a harmony between the various powers within Ravanel through diplomatic means, since she does not have the military strength to force compliance from her subjects and cannot afford to alienate any allies in the fragile new state that the country is in. Although she has performed admirably so far, the difficulty of her position has increased as tensions mount between Chiliax and Endoran. Ravanel gained its independence by unusual and dramatic means. A rebel group, the Silver Ravens, uncovered a long-forgotten infernal document, the Kintargo Contract, and determined that its terms held a loophole that could be used to legally break House Throne's grip on the Archduchy of Ravanel. The Silver Ravens deposed Paracount Barzillai Throne, who had used his temporary seat in Kintargo to plot treason against his own house, installed Lord Mayor Benilis as their leader of this new nation, and worked to unite various factions within Ravanel behind her. Upon attaining office, Lord Mayor Benilis chose the title Domina, an old-fashioned honorific that had fallen into disuse after the Chelish Civil War. The choice of title was meant to signal both that Ravanel now stood outside of House Throne's perversion of those values, or an indication that she did not intend to repudiate Ravanel's Chelish heritage and connections. This ambiguity is deliberate and characteristic of Ravanel's positions. Several disparate groups hold influence within Ravanel. First and foremost are the wealthy families of Kintargo, who control the shipping concerns, establish industries, and domestic trade networks within the new country. Sea trade is particularly important because of the collapse of Menador Gap has cut off land trade until Ravanel can clear the gap. This is an expensive and ongoing project, and it has spurred a certain amount of resentment toward the Silver Ravens, who won the nation's independence, in part by deliberately destroying the pass to prevent Chiliax from attempting a military takeover. Now that invasion is no longer an immediate risk, many are second-guessing the cost that Ravanel incurred to prevent it. Other influential groups in the New Realm include the aquatic elves of the Dismal Niche, the Strix of the Ravanel Forest, and the self-styled kings and queens of Vera, the City of Masks. These last have kept Ravanel's government at a flirtatious distance, offering it sporadic and unreliable support without pledging any formal alliance. Each of these groups offer valuable trade goods, military defenses, and regional intelligence, but none are accustomed to coordinating their interests or activities with the others. The new government of Ravanel is forever coaxing them to cooperate, and they have sometimes chafed at its demands. Meetings of the Council of Peers, as the faction's representatives are called, can be fractious. The Bellflower Network, a secretive, halfling-centric organization that smuggles escaped slaves out of Chiliax to freedom, has also developed a strong presence in Ravanel, which has outlawed slavery under its new regime. However, Ravanel's emerging status as a haven for escaped slaves has caused it quite a few headaches as slave hunters such as the Hell Knight Order of the Chain demand the government's cooperation in apprehending fleeing slaves. An additional complication is that some Kintargan nobles, whose sympathies and business connections remain with Chiliax, have taken to kidnapping slaves and selling them back to the Infernal Empire. While Domina Benilis would dearly love to put an end to this practice, she does not yet have the political or economical strength to confront these nobles who collectively could threaten the stability of her entire regime. Despite this, the mood in the young country is overwhelmingly optimistic. Chiliax's most ardent loyalists have returned to their mother country, and the citizens who remain are determined to build Ravanal into a fairer and kinder society. While most of its people never believed they would live to see a day in which, after a largely bloodless revolution, they could declare their independence from the Empire of Devils and force House Throne to respect that independence. If that means Ravanal must be slightly poorer and less grandiose than it was as an Archduchy of Chiliax, this is a fair loss. For at least now its wealth and prestige can be shared more equitably among its citizens. Now, as a GM, I would say that the main reason, the primary reason, Abrogail Throne or Chiliax has not straight up attacked Ravanal, given its independence, is like Asmodeus. They respect contracts. If there's a loophole in the contract, that was the devil's or whatever entity, most likely the devil, who wrote the contract, that was their fault. So, again, no, they're not gonna, unless they got a hold of that contract, destroyed the contract, or the contract became void for some reason or another. For the most part, as a GM, I would rule that they would never actually pursue the country unless there was a real reason to. Anyway, we go into Vera over here in the north, the northern island of Ravanal. The independent city-state of Vera, known as the City of Masks, predates Chiliax and has long been famous for its riotous entertainments. Gambling halls, fighting pits, brothels, and hawkers of every imaginable vice crowd the city, catering to get cut. Gambling halls, fighting pits, brothels, and hawkers of every imaginable vice crowd the city, catering to wealthy Chilaxians seeking a respite from their regimented lives. Since Ravanal declared independence, Vera's status has become even more ambiguous. The masked king and queens who rule the city declared their support for Ravanal while simultaneously encouraging their Chelish visitors to continue carousing as if nothing had changed. And indeed, little seems to have changed in Vera today. The same cruel entertainments that were available under Queen Abrogail's II's rule are still performed under Domina Benilis' flag, and the same promise of anonymity is offered to its guests. Beneath the surface, however, much is in flux. Vera is a center of Norgaber's worship, and Vera's current position as a playground between Chiliax and Ravanal has created a perfect opportunity for the Norgaber's faithful to harvest secrets, sow betrayals, and sabotage both sides of the divide. And that concludes Ravanal and all the major lore for each section or each region of Old Chiliax. We now move forward to the backgrounds available. I've always loved this picture they have in the book of this tiefling monk. I think that's pretty cool. Worshiper of Asmodeus. Very interesting. An Asmodean monk. You never think you'd see the day. Anyways, the first background available if you're from Chiliax is the Atarin Rancher. You grew up breeding the famous horses of the Atarin ranches in northern Nidal. You may even be sympathetic to the Desnan dissidents who hide there from the Umbral Court. 2 ability boosts, strength, dexterity, free ability boosts. I think it should be strength constitution, because cleaning horses is tiring, especially if you're doing it all day, breeding and training them. Very tiring. I would argue strength and constitution. But I mean, I guess it does take dexterity to train them too, so again, up to your discretion. You're trained in the nature skill and the animal lore skill, and you gain train animal. Duh. If it was anything else, I'd be a little upset. Quick thing. I might sacrifice animal lore, and I would ask for Nidal lore, since Nidal has access to lore that no other country in Golarion has, given that they survived Earthfall. I would contest my GM for that. If I was you, player, fight for your right for lore. Next, the Bellflower Agent. You joined a secret society dedicated to freeing halfling slaves, most likely from the cruelty of Chelish reign. You know how to smuggle people in and out of countries. Choose 2 ability boosts, dexterity or charisma. I would agree with these 2. You're trained in the stealth skill and the underworld lore skill, and you gain the experienced smuggler skill feat. Makes sense. Makes sense. Personally, I would say you would be, just as a note here, I look at the Bellflower Network. It's pretty much the Underground Railroad of the United States Civil War. Basically a 1-in-1 Underground Railroad. So anyway, that's just if you're wanting to know what that is. So, Chelish Rebel. You join the fight against House Throne. You may have helped liberate the nation of Ravano, or might be involved in another rebellion, such as Pazax, that studied Ravanel's successes. Choose 2 ability boosts, dexterity or charisma. I don't know about dexterity. It seems a little weird. I would say strength charisma, because we don't see strength charisma. I'd love to see strength charisma. Anyway, you're trained in the society skill and the Kintargo lore skill. You gain the streetwise skill feat. All makes sense here. All makes sense. Although I would argue streetwise, but that's for another day. Child of West Crown. Whether you come from West Crown or elsewhere, you hold the values of pre-Throne Chiliax dear. You disdain the infernal government, but you are proud of your country and do not consider yourself a rebel. So you're kind of that Switzerland. I love my country, but I don't like what it is, I guess. Choose 2 ability boosts, strength or charisma. Makes sense. You're trained in the diplomacy skill and the West Crown lore skill. Cool. Up to you. I might fight for Chiliax lore skill. That's just me. You gain the group impression skill feat. I don't know about that one, but that's just me. Next, Goblin Blood Orphan. Your family, whether goblin, hobgoblin, or human, died in the Goblin Blood Wars. Though you were marked by these losses, you managed to survive through your own resilience and resourcefulness. You choose 2 ability boosts. One must be dexterity or constitution, and 1 is a free ability boost. Dex, I don't know. Maybe I say strength constitution. Just because most people, how do I put this? Most people Most commoners are like people that have ever fought. Most fights are determined by strength, not someone's dexterity, in terms of people who are not formally trained. But anyway, you're trained in survival lore and the Goblin lore skill, and you gain assurance feat with survival. I like it. I like it. I like it. All right. Shadow Haunted. You are from Nidal, and regardless of your personal values, zon'kuthon has a claim on your soul due to an ancient pact. The Midnight Lord's unsettling influence is bred deep into your bones. You gain 2 ability boosts. One must be intelligence or wisdom, and one is a free ability boost. The wisdom, I disagree with the wisdom. I would say charisma. I would argue charisma, and the only reason why that is because of the hold of zon'kuthon on you. Would probably also have a hold on just how you present yourself, even unconsciously present yourself. You're trained in the intimidation skill and the shadow plane lore skill. Cool. You gain the quick coercion skill feat. Meh. Not bad. The Throne Loyalist. Despite the setbacks Chiliax has suffered recently, your loyalties lie with the devil-backed House Throne. You consider the current queen to be the rightful ruler of your homeland, and you are willing to act against her enemies. You choose 2 ability boosts. One must be intelligence or charisma, and one a free ability boost. You're trained in the religion skill and the hell lore skill, and you gain the student of the canon skill feat. Really cool one. I actually like this one. For those that still want to be loyal to their country, even given its current state. And next we have the Hell Knight Arminger as the archetype available in Chiliax. Love the picture here. I think she looks really cool. Really cool. You don't have to be a big Chad to be a Hell Knight. You could be thin and lean and wear plate. Still cool. Dig it. Which reminds me, I hope they bring back the Grey Maidens, seeing her thin plate armor. That'd be really cool. So the dedication begins. Uncommon archetype is level 2 access. Prerequisites: member of the Hell Knight or of a Hell Knight order, trained in heavy armor as well as your order's favored weapon, and you must be from Old Cheliax. A lot of people are not fans of the access, but I dig it because it's one of those things that's where they're from. Now you could also make the argument that or people would make the argument, oh well, not all the schools are in Chiliax, or all the orders don't all reside in Chiliax. Some of, like, one of them is in Varisia and all that stuff. For the most part, if you don't have Chilexian descendancy, if you look way back in 1E lore, you wouldn't be let in. Just no, they wouldn't let you in. So your Hell Knight training teaches you to terrorize others into compliance, but you also study the structure and hierarchy of hell. You must survive painful tests of your body and mind called reckonings, which steady your mind against all sorts of trauma. You gain resistance to mental damage equal to 1 plus the number of class feats from the Hell Knight Armager archetype and other Hell Knight archetypes. You become trained in intimidation and hell lore. If you were already trained, you become an expert instead. Special: you cannot select another feat, blah blah blah, same as every other dedication. Now, here's my honest opinion of here and for the rest of this video. The Lost Omens World Guide, when it came out, they were still figuring out the balance of making archetypes and dedications, multi-class dedications in the game. The archetypes you'll find in the Advanced Player's Guide and such are very strong. And I really feel like the Hell Knight got the shit end of the stick. In terms of the dedications, they're kind of weak, and I'll get more into that. And what I would suggest for changes in the next video. In the next video, the Hell Knight faction video. I'll go over into those changes first, but for now, just know that my opinion of the Hell Knight in general, if you go on Archives of Nethys 2 on Google or anything like that, you can look at all the Hell Knight stuff. It's kind of just mediocre, but we continue. You become trained in Intimidation and Hell Lore. If you're already trained, you become expert instead. Okay, next. We have Ardent Armager. Fee level 4, prerequisite, Hell Knight Armager dedication. You have been trained to resist the manipulation of fiends, and your Hell Knight discipline makes you difficult to influence. You gain a +1 circumstance bonus to saves against mental effects that significantly improve your attitude and your will DC against someone coercing you, demoralizing you, making an impression on you, or making a request of you. Now, making an impression on you or a request of you, I don't ever let an NPC just, like, they don't make the physical roll, even if it's secret, to make an impression or make a request of you. I think that's kind of cheesy. Because, oh, well, you feel like you must go do this request because her diplomacy is a 22 and she rolled a 32 against your will DC, which is only 24. You're like, what? No, I don't. What? So again, kind of weird, but anyway, if a mental effect would compel you to act in a way that violates your Hell Knight Order's tenets, as determined by the GM, you can attempt to break free from the effect as a reaction, triggered by receiving the violating order, and you gain another will save against the effect. You can attempt this new one only once for a given effect, even if you are compelled to violate your order's tenets multiple times. Which is, again, I don't know. It's not bad. Like, it's interesting because, plus, you can't shit on a +1 bonus, but it's kind of man. Anyway, next, Theobolic Certitude. Prerequisite. Oh, the fee level 4, free action. Prerequisites. What I do like about this is it is a skill feat, not a class feat. It is a skill feat. Prerequisites, dedication, trigger, your turn begins, and you can observe a devil. Your Hell Knight training drilled details of Hell's denizens deep into your mind. Make an attempt to recall knowledge about the devil you're observing. If you roll a critical failure, you only get a failure instead. Okay, again. If you've studied Hell, there are more than devils in Hell. There are fiends, Velstrak. There are just many, or Velstrak are fiends, but like, I don't know why you wouldn't get fiends too. That seems a bit weird. I would rule that you get fiends too, but again, another time. So next, at level 4, again, this is a class feat or archetype feat. Mortification. Prerequisites, dedication. Your reckonings have prepared your body for physical punishment. Choose bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage based on the nature of your physical reckonings. So that's pretty much up to the GM. You gain resistance to the chosen damage type equal to the number of class feats from the Hell Knight Arminger archetype and other Hell Knight archetypes. That would mean to make this useful, you would have to take almost every feat you could take, which... Next, the Arminger's mobility. This is the last feat you have access to, at least in the world guide for the, or for the Armiger, excuse me. Prerequisites, expert in heavy armor, Hell Knight Arminger dedication. You've learned how to best move in heavy armor. When wearing heavy armor, if you meet the strength requirement, instead of reducing the penalty by 5 feet, you reduce it by 10. Typically reducing this penalty to 0. If you're a dwarf with unburned iron, you gain a speed of 5 feet. This is the one useful feat they have. But here's the semi-crappy part. If we open up the Advanced Player's Guide and we go to the archetypes and we go to the Bastion on page 159, let's say you want to play, because you want to make a fun build. Let's say you want to make a, let's say you want to make a barbarian who's a Hell Knight. Or what you can do that. Pick up armor proficiency, or you take the Bastion. Or I'm sorry, is it the Bastion or the Sentinel? I think it's the Sentinel. Excuse me, my apologies here. The Sentinel. This allows you to get trained in heavy armor and all that fun stuff. On page 191 of the Advanced Player's Guide here. So let's see. You become trained light armor, medium armor. If you already trained light armor, medium armor, you gain training in heavy armor. And when you gain greater proficiency in armor, it also goes up for heavy armor. Woohoo, barbarian. So, but again, not every class has access to that. So let's say you wanted to make a cleric. That was a Hell Knight. Say make a cleric of Asmodeus. Well, you have to take Sentinel. If you wanted access to this, have to take Sentinel. So again, the expert in heavy armor. I don't know about that, Chief. Makes sense, but again, kind of forces certain classes. Again, if you were a Hell Knight of, or if you were a, if you were a cleric of Asmodeus who wanted to be a Hell Knight, which would make sense. It's the only way you could get this, which is kind of crappy because according to all the other feats, most of the feats require you to get as many Hell Knight feats as you can. So it's like, okay, if you're gonna require me to get feats, but then you're gonna cut feats off to certain classes without having to super dip into other feats and stuff. Because here's the crappy part. The only way, because you actually wouldn't even have enough feats to get out of Bastion by the time you could qualify for the Armager mobility, unless you had multi-talented because you're human and you got that at level 9. Come on, game. Come on, game. But again, I'm not here to complain. This concludes the Old Chiliax. Where in the world? But you guys, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, guys and gals, excuse me. And if you're a cardinal already because you subscribe, use that lovely beak to go ahead and smash the bell. I'd much appreciate it. Again, definitely taking requests for lore. Please, the next lore video I'd like to do is a legend lore. So if you know any legends, I'd like to get that series started as well. If someone has a special request. But again, fitting, either there is no request for the what I call the Legends of Golarion. The first one we have is Abrogail Throne II, so kind of fitting because she's alphabetically the first one there. So, but again, thanks so much for watching, guys. Welcome to the nest, and we'll see you next time.